Hello, everybody. It's Tuesday. We are live, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but we didn't lose faith. We didn't swap out the bull yet for the bear, and there's a lot of so much to tell. In fact, I could have put together 100 slides today for this because there's so much news, but I kept it at 55. So let's try get through 55 pieces of news in 25 minutes. Be ready. Thank you, Team D, Tesla, Sean D, K8, everybody else for being here. Let's go. I hope everything's working. Yeah, let's just assume it is. So this one's about energy floors support, macro, money, AI, future of jobs, a ton more. Let's get into it. Bitcoin's balance engine, not financial advice. And a big thank you to everybody on Patreon too. This is from Chevy Dalziel. I like that name. His Patreon is worth it. 6 months in now. I wish I joined earlier. Yeah, it's been an interesting 6 months, but it's been a great 5 years. Anyway, let's get into the ugly news first. First of all, OpenAI, ChatGPT goes code red. We'll start with the ugly news. And as you know, I've been calling OpenAI a house of cards for a long time. Once it slipped behind Grok from XAI, Elon Musk, and then it slipped behind Gemini. And it's just this guy says some weird stuff. But I'm not the only one to know that too. In fact, Jack Mallers calls Sam Altman Sam Bankman Freed. We all know what that means. That's not a good look, my friends. Anyway, let's not waste any more time on that ugly news. Let's talk about the bad news. Fear and greed is still below 25 extreme fear. It's at 23 right now. A little higher for stocks. And AltSeason indicator is back to the Bitcoin side, down at about 41. I'm going pretty fast because I want to get to the real meaty stuff in a minute. Narratives. Privacy died. That was short-lived. I hope nobody bought Zcash at the top at 750, but it's falling off a cliff right now. It's down about 50% from the all-time highs. And it was like hype and Zcash were the two big alt winners of 2025. But, you know, everything mean reverts, as we know. But social came back. No idea what chains are in social, but either way, they are positive and everything else is negative. That's why it's in the bad news category. Another piece of bad news, but it's actually good news. Shout out to Crypto Rover. If you look here, he put together this really cool chart of the little red boxes at the bottom. That's when the PMI, the manufacturing index, business cycle, it's all in contraction, which means it's under the zero line. But when it goes positive, Bitcoin goes positive. Now, the reason this is in the ugly news, because it's bad for manufacturing. But we know the AI data center build-out is huge, and that should bring about a PMI pump. That's why we talk about it. And Bitcoin typically sees its biggest rallies once the business cycle returns to expansion. And there's many reasons why that's going to happen. Things like rate cuts, things like new tax laws, things like QE, new money printing, which we'll talk about too, should pump it all. So literally, despite what we've been through, that is the bad and the ugly news for today. Let's get into the good news. Now, bizarro numbers. Bizarre numbers. You can't make this stuff up. November was down 17.4%. And so far, December is up 1.74%. That's a 10x delta. And if you don't believe me, I zoomed into the numbers here. November down 17.4. December up 1.74. And a lot of people, sometimes when we go back and look at this, it's like, oh, well, November's red. Sometimes December's red. Yeah, but the sample size isn't really enough. We've only had a couple of cases. We had a red December in 2011 that turned into a red November, turned into a positive December. We had red Novembers in 2019, 2018. They also were red in December. And we had a red December in 2020, red November in 2022, and that turned into a slightly red December. But again, this time is different because we didn't have the confluence of things like QE starting again, like rate cuts, all that. And I can't underestimate how big that is. We'll talk about liquidity in a minute too. Crypto over the last 7 days against Bitcoin. ETH apparently beat Bitcoin. Litecoin didn't and others didn't. But in terms of the mix, it was a weird week because something shot up and something shot down. In fact, there must be a miscalculation there on this chart because compared to Bitcoin, ETH beat it by 8.22%. I don't think that's correct. But this is correct. ETH is up 8.22% for the week. Bitcoin is up 3.15% for the week. And it's incredible. Sometimes when we have a violent dip in Bitcoin, like we did on Sunday and Monday morning, people lost their minds. But we'll get to the V-shaped recovery. That's been crazy. And this puts it all in perspective. That's why I like looking back to the week before and how far we've come. And everything else pretty much green, except for Litecoin, Doge, and some other random names. And even Cardano is dark green, but that's still under 2021 prices. So if you held for 5 years, good luck to you. Now, let's look at money flows. Very important as well. The ETFs did book some positive numbers, up $1.07 billion. And we had 4 bad weeks, 4 negative weeks in a row. And as I said last week, it's rare you have 5. In fact, we've never had 5 negative weeks. And a lot of people say that this was helped by, an imminent US rate cut, maybe also cheap prices, because crypto is cheap. Maybe TradFi said, whoa, very cheap, I got to buy some. Now, this is a bit of the crazy news that sometimes is illogical. And we still have a lot of illogical stuff happening in the markets. But you can see here, Bitcoin pulled in 461 million. That's good. ETH, 309 million. Good. Solana, a little positive amount, 4.5 million, which is nothing. And XRP, 289 million. XRP nearly pulled in the same amount as Ethereum, which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. That's the largest ever weekly inflow into this asset in its history. Crazy. Cardano saw outflows of 19.3 million. People may be giving up the ghost, but this is so bizarre. And I do want to share one chart really to show you how crazy this is. This is the market cap per user. I can also show you the market cap per transaction. It's even more extreme. But the market cap for XRP per user is 8,600 times higher than that of Solana. That, in my opinion, is irrational. ETH is about $600,000, which is about 600 times higher than Solana. So just, there's many ways to measure crypto. Market cap per transaction, market cap per user, market cap per volume, market cap per volume, per stablecoin, balance, you name it, everything else. It's wildly illogical. Who the hell is buying XRP? I have no idea. Let's look at the ETF flows too. A little deeper dive into following the money. And I look at these on a weekly basis. We had a tiny, tiny bit of green so far for the week for Bitcoin, which is good. We had a tiny, tiny bit of red for the week, but it was positive last week. And this is for the US ETFs. These numbers above here includes the global ETFs, okay, like Sweden and Brazil and other things. So it's important to remember that. And then the Solana ETF, also slightly red like the Ethereum one. But I want to take a minute and talk about what has happened since the last bear market. And Glassnode had these pretty cool charts, and shout out to Sanjay as well, who got them. Let's talk about dominance. I've already talked about dominance, but a lot of this data tells an interesting picture. We saw Bitcoin dominance in the bottom of the bear market was 38.7%, and now it's 58.3%. It has swung up violently, and a lot of that has to do with the DATs and the ETFs. Stablecoin dominance went from 17.3% to 8.3%. That's actually fallen. Altcoin dominance, 27% to 21.3%. So altcoins have not done well. Either has Ethereum. Ethereum 17.1% down to 12%. So a lot of the dominance has gone to Bitcoin and away from everything else. So Bitcoin has been the winner since the bottom of the bear. Another cool view, and there are people still, I guess, maybe there's people that buy tops, there's people that buy bottoms. I always stress, try be a bottom fisher because it's much better for your return on investment. But if you bought at the bottom of the bear, you were up today 500% on Bitcoin. Not bad, despite what happened. That's going back to November, December 2022. Now, what's really interesting about this, at least from my perspective, if you had an average equal weighting bag size of altcoins or Ethereum, your return was the same. But only a few altcoins have done well. A lot of the old, what I call zombie chains, have just been annihilated. And you see things like Cardano less than it was in the last bull market of 2021. It's lower today. And it's crazy to see, but that is interesting. Again, you got to excise out the winners here. But to see the ETH performance, the altcoin performance after how bad the altcoins have been, that's pretty interesting. Now, another cool chart is this. And it proves that this cycle is very unlike others. And I'll say it for the 150th time, this time is different in every single perspective. Let me show you this cool chart from Glassnode. And they talk about how, unlike prior cycles, this is where in prior cycles, capital typically rotated out of Bitcoin into ETH and then further at the risk curve into altcoins after ETH. But this cycle, nope, not at all. Bitcoin had multiple waves of capital inflow, pulling in 40 billion to 190 billion per month, whereas Ethereum only had one modest rotation alongside Bitcoin, and that was in Q3 2025. Shout out to Tom Lee. Again, follow the money. This proves why Bitcoin dominance is higher, because it's pulling in more money. Follow the money. It's not hard, folks. And that is crazy. The ETH net cap blue, you can see that little pump there, happened after Tom Lee started Bitmain. The rest of the time, nothing really happened. And of course, Bitcoin pulled in the lion's share. Stable coins as well has grown a little bit. And that is a very cool chart to look at. Now, where did I go next? Let's talk about this. This is the V for Vendetta. I tweeted earlier this morning. The V-shaped recovery. Sunday, we were at 91K. 48 hours later, we were at 91K. But the point is we fell to 83,000. That $8,000 tankage that happened Sunday night, Monday, scared a lot of people. But the recovery caught a lot of people off guard. And there's nearly $500 million of liquidations out there. People on the short side thinking we were going to 80K. Well, that didn't happen. But why is Bitcoin going up? Well, one of the reasons, and in full disclosure, I used to mock Vanguard for being vanguarded for all these years. Well, Vanguarded No More. They have just today opened up their retirement accounts and everything else for customers to Bitcoin ETFs. So they are Vanguarded No More. And remember, they have about $11 trillion in assets under management. I think BlackRock's about 14 trillion. Fidelity's about 7. Schwab, 8. Like these four big players are like the four horsemen of whatever, the apocalypse. They control $30+ trillion. And when they give customers access to something, the result is quite explosive. Let's see, like you might think, oh, who's using Vanguard? Well, people that are stuck in there from places where they work, where their retirement accounts are and things like that, or even after they leave their job, they still keep the same account just for simplicity. Well, guess what happened in the first 30 minutes? There was $1 billion of trading volume in IBIT, which is probably the most traded Bitcoin ETF exposure out there. Again, $1 billion volume in 30 minutes. And that is pretty huge. Also, Bitcoin went up nearly 6% too. So is this all driven by spot ETF? No, I don't think so. There's other players at hand here. But it just shows you this whole thing is still very, very manipulated. And making the rounds, Elon was talking this week about, over the weekend, he did an interview and he talked about how the US is heading towards a massive debt crisis. We're heading to 40 trillion in debt. And this will, he believes, this will fuel a major Bitcoin boom. One of the things he said was, and this is, he's probably not looking at the price and how much it fell on Sunday and everything else. I think he did the interview on Sunday. But what is interesting is he spoke about, rate cuts coming. And Musk also said money will disappear as a concept because of the age of abundance. And then he said energy is the only real form of money and that Bitcoin is energy, which is great. Which takes me to the big story today. Let's try and look at this Bitcoin as energy stuff. This is the Bitcoin energy oscillator. Shout out to Bitcoin Long too from AO. But this is cool. And his chart basically says each time Bitcoin's energy oscillator bounced off the lowest levels. A Bitcoin bull run followed, and it's currently bouncing at those levels again. Last time we had bounces at these levels, that was 2012, 2015, 2020, and now here. In fact, if you look at what has happened since 2022, we've been hovering around here. We haven't actually had a bounce. Not saying we are going to bounce, but we're definitely overdue for a bounce. Now, I always like to try and find confluence across different indicators, which is kind of, this one's kind of related as well. This is Bitcoin's energy floor price. And the short note is you got a production cost of electricity on average across all the Bitcoin miners. And to mine one Bitcoin, you have to spend about $71,000 in electricity. So if you're at home mining, expect to have a lot of electricity charges if you hope to mine one Bitcoin. Anyway, 71 grand. It's interesting to think about. But why we care is because Bitcoin's energy floor is the floor of Bitcoin price historically. Very rarely does it ever breach this level. And of course, the protocol will adjust to miners if the miners unplug, or if electricity is too expensive, or the hash rate goes too high. The system adjusts itself. But we got pretty close to that electricity price when we fell to 80K a few weeks ago and 83K the other day. Now, what's also interesting for me, because I'm thinking beyond the chart, we all know globally electricity is getting more expensive because of AI and because of other reasons, people blowing up their nuclear stations and stuff like that. We won't get into that at all right now. But if AI is going to push electricity prices up, which it will, to me, that means theoretically it'll push up the Bitcoin floor price. And, and the funny part of this story that makes me laugh is like, nobody wants to pay more on electricity. But if you got Bitcoin bags, it's a hedge because your Bitcoin will go up. Get it? The floor price of Bitcoin goes up, electricity goes up. So you win either way. I hope people enjoy that. I'm probably the only crazy person who sees that. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. And in other news too, I went into CoinGlass today because last week I did share stuff about the Bitcoin balance and exchanges. It dropped about a huge amount of Bitcoin. I think it was 230,000 Bitcoin left in a week. And I wanted to chase up on that and see if we're still current. So I look at the charts on Glassnode, I look at the charts on CoinGlass, and I look at the charts on CryptoQuant. They all pretty much say the same thing. And now Bitcoin balance on exchanges just hit an all-time low. It's about $2.05 million. And when you put that in perspective, and you imagine there are 20 million Bitcoin, which are, of course, there's a lot less, but just imagine 20 million. 2 million Bitcoin is 10% of Bitcoin supply that's on exchanges right now. But also remember, even though it's on an exchange, it doesn't mean it's for sale. A lot of people don't trust self-custody, like myself. And, you know, I don't keep stuff in exchanges, but other things. But the point is, a lot of people do, and that doesn't mean it's for sale, at least not at the current price. So again, more goodness, but let's see what else we can find. This gets into the liquidity section and how Bitcoin sniffs out liquidity ahead of time. This is from CryptoQuant, from Axel, and he looks at the Impulse 7-day average Z-score, and this metric captures the money flows, absorption of outflows, inflows, etc. And given the crazy week we just had, it has gone slightly positive, and that's good. This means there is an impulse of liquidity into Bitcoin across ETF holdings and money flows and everything else. And this also is probably what took us up to 92K today after that big dip. It's many items have taken us kind of higher, which is good. Another thing that actually happened, sniffing out liquidity, the Fed Reserve. The night before, I think I reported on this in Patreon. They pumped $13.5 billion into the US banking system through the overnight repos. And that's the second largest injection since COVID. I hope I can say that word now without being silenced, and surpasses even the peak of the dot-com bubble. And that's the weird sideways blue line on the right-hand side. There's normally gaps between funding the reverse repo. There was a big pump in there at the end of October 2025. And then we see the one we just got right now. Again, big pump, and expect more of this. What's bizarre is the Fed said QT, quantitative tightening, would end December 1st. Literally midnight on December 1st, that happened. It's like, okay, there's probably a whole bunch of people with their little hands on the buttons ready to say, okay, pump it, fire up those money printers. It's just crazy how it happened. Anyhow, another cool indicator that is also a bullish sign. This is from Mags, the Scalping Pro. And this, at the bottom part of the chart, is Bitcoin dominance. No, sorry, Tether dominance. When Tether dominance hits 7%, that's typically when Bitcoin bottoms. And guess what? Tether dominance hit 7% yesterday. And that is the orange little box there. Every time that dominance hits that orange box, Bitcoin reverses and pumps. It's that simple. We'll see. This pattern has existed now since 2020. Let me get the exact time. Since 2023. So, yeah, will it continue? We think so. So, again, when you pulling in all of these different data points, all tell a very, very good bullish picture. But not all is good. So this is the top 50 over the last 30 days. Black is in the middle, which is Bitcoin, down 16.8%. It's been an ugly November. So much for Moonvember. Now, a couple of other things that have happened. One, Quant, a blast from the past. I remember trading that 5 years ago. Monero doing well. Caspa, another weird chain. Anyway, I won't talk about it. A lot of crap. But then all the stuff on the right getting destroyed. APTOS down 40%. Whatever that is, don't know. Tau, the AI thing, down 41%. It's been ugly across the board, everybody. Nobody made money unless they were all in on Quant over the last 30 days. But again, every dog has its day, as I say, for years. Let's talk about APTOS, because that triggered some interest. Why is it tanking so much? Well, it's not, because their stablecoin business is doing okay. This is the stablecoin supply changes over the last 24 hours. Ethereum, number one, doing 600 million bucks. Solana doing about 460 million. And APTOS did about $310 million of new stablecoins. What's also interesting about this, and Monad's on there too, number 4. But what's also interesting is Tron. Tron used to be the stablecoin leader, and they lost nearly 200 million of stablecoins. But again, that fluctuates day to day, but it's interesting to look at. And the reason I jumped in there is to find out, why is APTOS so weak? Anyhow, moving on. I also discussed briefly a week or so ago that Kalshi flipped Polymarket. They raised a ton of money. I can't remember, $500 million last week with Sequoia and a couple of Silicon Valley VCs. And they are off to the races. But even bigger than that, Kalshi is not only beating Polymarket, but guess what? Kalshi just moved over to Solana. Soon, or now, I haven't checked yet, because it'd be fun to bet on stuff. But Kalshi, a year ago, I think, was at 4% market share. Polymarket was 96%. Now, they have nearly 70% market share. And some people call it the Kalshi super cycle. And humans are degens, and they love gambling on everything. But Kalshi not only has eclipsed Polymarket, but it's growing much faster. And they moved to Solana, which will help them screech ahead even further. But remember, everything will be tokenized on this market. And this will be the number one betting market for everything on chain. Elections, CPI, job numbers, sports, stock prices, Bitcoin prices, rate cuts, you name it. All tradable as tokens on Solana. Huge win for real usage and real volume. And I need to check as well, before I say all roads lead to Solana. Eventually, best, cheapest, fastest is where you need to be. But I need to check if I can use it myself, because we couldn't use Polymarket in the past unless we were offshore. I wonder now that it's on chain with Solana, we can use Kalshi to bet. That'd be fun. Anywho, gambling is bad. Don't forget that. And speaking of betting, DEX perps are going absolutely berserk, bonkers, wild, whatever you want to say. And this explosive yet sustained growth reflects a clear structural demand for decentralized trading venues. People want independency, they want custody, they want transparency, and they want instant on-chain execution without sacrificing liquidity or depth. These new perp dexes, all of them, the Jupiters, the Asters, the Hype, the Drift, they're all making a ton of money. Much of their prices don't reflect it yet, but watch this space. 2026, I do not expect this thing to slow down. We could get a mini perp dex AltSeason off the back of this action because I don't see it slowing down. By the way, shout out to nearly $80 billion in daily volume. That's a lot for something that's completely decentralized. Let's talk about stocks for a minute, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you to wonderful mods in the chat and everybody being here. Stocks are mixed the last 7 days. As you know, we focus on AI here. NVIDIA up nearly 4%, Apple 4%, Microsoft 3.3%, Google down 3%, but Google has been on a rampage. I was still kicking myself I didn't buy at 187 a few weeks ago. Anyway, Amazon 4%. What's with this 4% today? Meta 4%. My goodness. Tesla 3.51%. If you round that up, that's 4%. It's like everything went up 4%. Crazy. Where's Broadcom? Down 1%. At least that broke the trend. So mixed. But remember, rate cuts are coming, which is good for these risk assets. Stock fear and greed is at 25, which has gone to fear. If it's at 24, it's extreme fear. So that's out of the woods right now. And remember, stock markets are hitting new all-time highs. A quick look at the S&P 500 over the last 3 years. And shout out to Sanjay and Kobasi for this one. The inspiration for this is my chart. But if you look at the gainers, this is kind of really impressive. The S&P 500, it's gone up 80% over the last 3 years. But the reason the 3 years, the anchor point here, is that is the time when ChatGPT launched 3 years ago. Again, AI is the biggest asteroid to ever hit this planet, probably since the dinosaurs, if you believe in that type of thing. Anyhow, you can see here all of this action. This 80% gainer in the S&P 500 was up 80%. It was driven by things like NVIDIA and others. And the S&P 500 market cap has grown by $24 trillion. That is pulling in, adding $22 billion in value every single day for nearly 1,100 days. Crazy to think. And if you look at the dip on that little chart there, the little orange dip, that's the tariff tantrums. That. And see how bad it was and see how quickly it rebounded. Again, yet another V-shaped recovery. When the markets are being flooded with money, it'll rise all boats, including indexes. Now, you probably think, whoa, S&P 500. Why don't I just invest in that? Well, in the same time frame, Tesla's up 260% over the same time frame. So, again, not bad, but and NVIDIA probably up even more. I can't remember the exact number, but it's important to excise the winners and don't play the indexes. But indexes are good if it's all you can get. And Tesla FSD is ramping violently across Europe. Shout out to all our European friends watching. You can see here we have France next in the box, and this is a media outlet. Shout out to Sawyer Merritt as well. But they were allowed to film everything, and they have a huge video coming, including the long uncut. But it's mind-blowing, both for safety and for the humanity of the choices. French media saying it's mind-blowing and it's good for human safety. And we thought it would be impossible to get FSD approved in Europe because Europe hates, well, they like regulations and they hate maybe Elon and AI and stuff. But anyway, it's coming. Spain, Netherlands, Norway, Germany. Wonder when Italy is going to come. Anyhow, and the Italian roads are a challenge too, worse than the Paris roads. We also have the Tesla semi-ramping in Nevada. These blue boxes are all the equipment that go into making Tesla semi-trucks. Not sure exactly whether, maybe seats, windows, all that type of thing. But these things are going to ramp, hopefully, to close to 50,000 units by the end of next year. Again, there's so many tailwinds coming for Tesla in 2026, it's not even funny. And there's rumors that the whole supply chain is now about to be finally approved for the Optimus robot too. And of course, Robotaxi is going to scale as well. Now, on the subject of AI, this is a cool post as well made by the CEO of Microsoft called Satya Nadella. And so easy way to remember his name is it's close to Nutella. Satya Nadella, Satya Nutella. Anyway, very smart guy. He had a very interesting piece on the future of work. And he called it, I think it was macro delegation and micro steering. And instead of doing the work, humans will be assigned like a managerial position to manage AI agents. And the humans managing these will manage the exceptions, just like sometimes happens in real world. And my take is, the good news is humans won't be replaced, but they'll be promoted. And they'll go from being doers to directors of AI teams. And humans should start now focusing their time on judgment, creativity, exception management, not routine tasks. And again, let AI do the grunt work and be there as part of the kind of rubber stamper, approver, exception manager, etc., whether it be 20% of cases or 5% of cases. But that was a positive note too. But I urge you, if you are in this type of realm, start thinking very hard about that future of work, becoming that director instead of the doer. I think that will be very positive. And speaking of money yet again, Fed rate cut is now 89%. And that cut's coming in 7 days. Once we get 80% 2 weeks out, it's in the bag. And then again, that's good for risk assets. The less return people get on their fiat, the more they deploy it into risk assets, pumps risk assets. And if risk assets have to borrow, it makes borrowing cheaper too. It'll also completely juice the real estate market. Okay, when rates come down, it takes a while for the mortgage rates to respond. When those mortgage rates come down, it'll enable people to start selling their homes, buying new ones, bigger ones, whatever. And it'll also enable a lot of people to buy property, maybe for the first time. So expect that to jack real estate prices too. So be careful. Now's the time to buy before the rate cuts come. And it's death season for selling real estate. It's the best season for buying, as you always hear me say. And speaking of more rate cuts, this is a big policy shift happening in the US. And there's a new guy called Kevin Hassett, who is the lead favorite, 72% odds, again from Kalshi. I don't know how many times I mentioned Kalshi today, but that's where all the betting happens. If you want to bet, that's I think $4.5 million of volume on this. If you want to bet on who the next Fed chair is, well, it looks like Hassett's going to win. And why do we care? Well, this guy, he loves low interest rates. He understands the deficit. He knows he needs to make money cheap. He needs to drive more liquidity. And then risk assets will go up and Bitcoin will go up, etc. We're seeing two things happen that we saw at the same time during C19 back in March, April 2020. Rate cuts and quantitative easing. Today, we just started quantitative easing and more rate cuts. The third one this year is coming in 9 days. Or is it 7 days? 7 days. It's coming even sooner than I expected. Also, speaking more about money, because it's a money channel, and thanks to Bitcoin Long as well, this is the amount of tariffs collected, net customs duties, now hit nearly $32 billion in October, a new all-time high. And that's over 4 times what it was a year ago. And at this pace, annual tariff revenue would exceed $300 billion for the first time. And there's also talk for the US administration that if the tariffs continue to be good, maybe it could replace taxes or at least reduce them. We shall see. And Iran strikes gold. Hope people don't think this is political, but apparently people are finding gold all over the planet. I think Asia, Africa, now in Iran, parts of South America. And they apparently have found about 61 million tons. Of course, that's not 61 million tons of gold, but of course, it has to be pulled out. But the point is, they believe they could pull out a lot, which is huge. So again, gold is not as hard as Bitcoin. In fact, the amount of gold produced every year is about 3,000 tons, 110 million ounces. And if you multiply that by the current price of gold, it's about $462 billion, or a quarter of Bitcoin's market cap. Bitcoin is hard. Gold, not as hard. In fact, gold is very soft in its raw form. But with all these gold discoveries, I don't know how long it's going to continue, but it might make it softer. And then there'll be one pristine digital gold, and that's Bitcoin. We'll see. I'm here for it. Now, it's been such a good recovery day. Let's check the Bitcoin price. 91.5. I'll take that. Bitcoin now $5,200 today. But everybody's freaking out. Jeff Lutzo, his comments is like, everybody became a Japanese bond expert last week. But Bank of Japan rethinks rate hikes, and Bitcoin takes a nosedive anyway. The point about this meme, and I love memes where you can tell a much bigger story. What happens if there's any inkling of fear in the market or a little bit of FUD, the market makers jump all over it, drive the price down to liquidate you. Don't let that happen. Again, look at the V-shaped recovery. Shows you it was all a complete nothing burger. And another one that's also very interesting. Shout out to Ocean JJ for this one. He creates the best memes. When I say something in a video, he'll turn into a meme. And I should do a video of all of his memes because they're hilarious. But they also have valuable lessons. But this is from Tom Lee. Sorry, Bitcoin won't be at all-time high in December. It will be in January. And if not in February, and if not, for sure in March. So I really want Tom Lee to be right. But I also know hope is not a strategy. And this was a lot. This is 55 slides. All of these are turned into Substacks that you can listen to, podcasts. You get all the slides, you get all the write-up, etc. Thank you to the team that does that. And I hope you all learned something. A big thank you as well to, and for everybody being here too during these crazy times in the markets. DBF 430, Nick Markovsky. It's like Tchaikovsky. I like that name. Swiper, no swiping. I am Colt. Piper. Haliakala. Sounds Hawaiian. And Clint Alexander 8. Thank you all for coming on, friends. And thank you, of course, the best mods in the world, Sean D, T&D, and K8, for keeping us all safe from scammers and toxicity, which we don't like. Don't put up with any toxicity in life. It'll just shorten your life and reduce the quality of your life. That's the key. Anyway, thank you all for coming. See you all tomorrow.